you. I saw some of these on a small screen, and even with this compromised view, the production values of this set of films are so amazing. It's really exciting. So very excited to start talking about these films and all the stories that are behind them. And one of the things I always want to talk about, and I do this with teaching, I have students making their final cuts right now over at Rollins for documentaries, and it is about story. We know it's the heart of filmmaking. My students and audience members alike often want to know from filmmakers, where did you get this story? Why this story? And if you make a documentary film, why these subjects? How did you find them? So we have an eclectic group of films here, but I thought I would begin with this question because I think that each of these stories in these films take us into reality, sometimes brutally, or into fantasy, which I think is really interesting, the collective group of them. So I'm going to begin. I'm going to start at this end of the table with Aaron and ask each of the filmmakers to tell us how you came to your story.
Sure, thank you. Goodness, so, I mean, our story was about 8 years in the making. So it's about a war photographer who comes back from overseas, and he gives up photography and is struggling with PTSD. He's given a new camera, it starts to see some weird things, and craziness ensues, and some David Lynchian kind of thing. And, but with that, really, I had always heard the trope of, the idea that there's a mystery behind a camera. I'd heard a story about someone who came back from Ecuador and they wouldn't allow them to take pictures of the locals. They thought it would take their soul. So I thought that was an interesting core, but I had seen that in genre films before, and I wanted to do something a little different. So it took a few years, and then finally we kind of stumbled on this, amalgamation of that with some PTSD elements. And I love whenever you have an unreliable narrator and you have that kind of ambiguity. So we took those elements, combined that into this kind of melting pot, and eventually Cameron, my co-writer, and I put this together. So it's a weird movie. So there's a lot of weird things that kind of came to influence it, but that's essentially the shortened origin.
Perfect. Well, you got a great performance. Oh, I'm not on. As a response, there it is. You got a great performance out of Christopher Denham. He's very convincing as Jack is having some kind of disorder or not.
Yeah, he's absolutely amazing. I could talk as long as you want to talk about how great Christopher Denham is, so no problem there.
Thank you.
They say write what you know, so I wrote a fantasy. But seriously, I kind of started with, I started as an actor, and I was in a lot of things that I was kind of like embarrassed to tell people to go watch. And I think as a woman, a lot of actresses have probably felt that way. And so I wanted to create something that, my grandparents could see. And also, that sounds a lot more adult than it was. That's not what I meant. But I think that I just kind of like wanted to create something that could bring generations of people together. And so I thought about what would I want to watch? What do I watch now, really? And I love Game of Thrones, and so I was like, what would that look like if you could watch it at any age? Game of Thrones for kids. So take out the sex and the violence and all of that, and what would you have? I don't know, a beautiful landscape. So that's where I started. But yeah, I wanted to create something that was like intergenerational, I think, and that's where my mind took me into this fantasy. I guess I used to like dream a lot as a kid, and that's it.
I'm originally from Arkansas, this small town, and my film is about a brother and sister who get trapped in this terrible tornado in their trailer park and left behind. And I grew up in Tornado Alley, and so we had 2 really bad tornadoes hit when I was a kid, and it crashed a trailer where 2 of my family members lived. And so I wanted to tell a story about kind of that poor community. And also I remember as a kid having a tornado basically chase us down the road and holding my brother's hand and really wishing that you can stop something terrible from happening. So that's where I came from.
Yeah. With me, after school, after I went to film school, I graduated I'm from San Diego. I grew up in San Diego, California, but I'm originally from Mexico. In school, I did 3 short films, and And I felt that those three didn't represent who I was as an artist, as a filmmaker. So I ended up writing a feature, and I'm trying to get it produced. So as a director, I said, nobody's going to give me a job. So I better have something to show them, to show a little bit of potential. So La Ramona was born out of is an inspiration out of the main character of the feature, but also is inspired by my mother. She came to this country undocumented a long time ago. She was very young, and she told me about the journey of crossing the border, through the desert. And then I also met the real coyote. And when I was at my old job, I was working at a check cashing place. He would come in and collect the money. I didn't know, I promised. But obviously, after he opened up with me, slowly, he would come every day, and until I find out who he really was. And we will talk in codes. He would say something like, "Did you see that bin over there or that car? I have 7." And I said, "What do you mean 7?" And then he would stare at me, he had 7 undocumented people in the back. And slowly he would tell me stuff like, this is what you do, this is blah, blah, blah. And then I start getting that information. So I had that information in the back of my head. So when I had the main character of La Ramona, I said, I need a really antagonist here. So that came along. And so it's pretty much a lot of little experiences that I lived, and now I have La Ramona, pretty much.
The feature documentary for Akeem is the story of a black teenage girl in my hometown of St. Louis, 17 years old when we meet her. She has been kicked out of her public school under zero tolerance policies for fighting, and the story follows her as she wrestles with issues of violent loss, racial inequity, juvenile injustice, and a number of other factors that refuse to diminish her dreams as she plans a better future for herself and the son, Akeem, who was born during the course of the film. It was about a 6-year process from initial reporting to completion of the film, and it's anchored in work that I did as a reporter for People magazine in my hometown. I was grateful to partner with a terrific group of filmmakers, one of whom's in the room, who were interested in exploring issues having to deal with the over-incarceration of juveniles in America, told through the very personal story of one who was affected by public policy.
My story, Night Shift, it's a story of a day in the life of a bathroom attendant in an LA nightclub. And I got the idea of the story from a friend of mine who does this job on the side. And he would tell me these stories, and I just thought it was so crazy and insane that I was like, this has to be a film. And I also thought it would be a great idea to tell this story that happens in one place and all these characters coming in and out of this one location. And I kind of relate to it in the sense that my background, I used to work with Michael Mann for many years, for a few years. And I was flying all around the world in private jets and working with top talent and everything. And then I was supposed to be doing another project, a feature film that fell apart. And to make money, I started doing Lyft. And I was thinking, oh my God, what if someone sees me who knows me from Michael? And I kind of incorporated that whole story into this story of Night Shift, of what the character is going through.
Thank you. I'm going to go a little bit deeper on the same theme and maybe get into some of the production of these stories with the actual people you worked with. So I'm going to borrow the closing line from Tiny Mammals. Maybe it was just a dream. These films, for me, watching them all, and anyone else who's been binging, someone else in here, anybody see Everything But Albion, which is playing? Anybody in here? Few of you. See, so we've got some good bingers in here. They are either commenting on, obviously, some incredible realities, or, on the flip side, starting from reality but then going into fantasy, or going into a place where we're not quite sure and we're unstable as a viewer, as we may be with some of our characters. Whether it's for Akeem, to the gut-wrenching La Ramona, or the struggling actor in Night Shift, and certainly in the reality that begins in the beautifully shot film Castile has brought us, and watching Camera Obscura and not sure that he is actually going to do the things he's going to do. I found myself saying out loud, no, he's not going to do that, is he? And yet he does. So I'm wondering if each of you could go into a little bit more about the struggles, and then also maybe, considering that many of you have younger people that you're directing in these films, that you can talk about what it was like working with young people in these experiences, or working with someone that has been involved with some kind of trauma.
Well, first, I just have to say it's almost intimidating hearing about all these amazing emotional films that you all are working on. And I have a crazy guy that kills people, so it makes me want to inspire to do something a little more worthwhile, I will say. Also, I haven't seen all the films yet, but For Akeem absolutely moved me, so congratulations on that, and I'm excited to see the rest. Didn't work with kids on this, obviously. That was deliberate, because all of our short films, for some reason, we always worked with kids and animals, and that we learned that that was a mistake. I'm sure it's a great thing for everyone else. For us, especially with gore effects and everything, it was a little crazy. But you know, on that note, it was difficult with Camera Obscura in particular, because even with Christopher Denham, who's such a method, amazing actor, every day, obviously you're shooting non-linearly because we don't have the budget to shoot in the order we wanted. So he's going through this cycle. So every day we would have to kind of regroup and say, what are you doing today? Okay, where is your mindset? Or hey, what has happened? Do you believe this is real today? Do you believe this isn't real? And we would go through these exercises to get him in the proper mindset so that he could do that. And then in that afternoon, it would change again, you know, and then he'd have to jump back and forth. And if you don't have the right, I've always appreciated actors on another level, but after this experience, it's just given me such, like, it's just a beautiful thing. It's just an absolutely beautiful thing. And you see someone who just, you're pulling through the ringer like that, back and forth, day after day, multiple times in a day. It's daunting. But, you know, again, I can talk about Christopher Denham as long as possible. So, but that was a big part of that, was just trying to find out, you know, what kind of through line you can have for that day, and how do you deconstruct what it is you're going through to justify the end means. For those that have seen the film, he does some pretty horrific things, but he's doing them, he believes, for a good reason. And how do you keep that character empathetic? How do you keep that character engaging? And that was a really tough line to kind of juggle. And it all deals with exactly what you're talking about, that uncertainty and ambiguity. So,
Great job. Thank you.
In my case, the lead of my film was a 1,200-pound horse. And then the second lead was a 14-year-old teenage girl. That was redundant, but I think that it's really important to stress teenage girl, taking her to Bulgaria, where she'd never been out of the country, and taking the horse to Bulgaria. That was easier. So she had never acted before, the lead girl. But I think that there's something kind of wonderful about that, and there is something really, people are so impressionable, I think, at that age, and especially when they haven't been in LA trying to get on Disney Channel for 5 years or whatever. So I think that that was actually a benefit, and we got to know each other very well, and so we could kind of stick things, you know, like kind of jabber a little bit. I knew what worked and what didn't, and kind of like getting into that with ethics, whatever, with a child. But it worked really, really well. And I think also on the whole, for the production, it's a fantasy, and so there's a lot of like just kind of deluding yourself into believing that you live in this fantasy world. And it helped being in Bulgaria, because it does seem like another world. And we didn't speak the language, so it was very much, I mean, it's on location, which already brings your cast and crew together, but also there were a handful of us that spoke English and the rest didn't, so we became very, very close, and that's something that I think really comes across on screen. It's a comedy, and so we all have to have fun with each other, and so the more we know each other, the better friends we became, and I think all of that, it's amazing to me how much the offset rapport comes across on screen, and it's really vital. And is that answering your question? I feel like I'm like telephoning off of him.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So I know my two actors. They're 13-year-old twins in this film. I had known them for 4 years. So my little actress, Sophia Lillis, who you can see as Beverly Marsh in the upcoming It film. I'm super proud of her.
Wow.
Yeah. I cast her 4 years ago. It was her first short film. And I had another actress cast in the part, and I knew it was somebody who had to carry the whole film with only speaking one line the entire film. And I had this other girl cast, and she dropped out. And so then I started this lengthy search, and I saw over 100 little girls. And she walked in the last slot 3 days before I started filming, and I just saw her face, and I was immediately like, it has to be this kid. So it was such a great process working with her, and then immediately she got cast in like a dozen things. And so, but I've always played the card, like you have to be in all of my movies, so I have her now. But her twin brother, who was born without legs, I saw him come to a screening, and I was immediately like, I have to cast you both in something. And he was like, I'm not an actor, I'm not gonna be in anything. So I spent a year convincing him to be in this film. And I wrote it for them as two twins, and I spent, on and off 3 years with them, getting to know them and seeing like what a great rapport they have with each other and how playful and symbiotic they are. So it was actually really easy to work with them because I had known them both for so long. The hard part was I shot this in upstate New York because I couldn't afford to go back to Arkansas, which is where I'm from and really where I wanted to shoot it. But I thought, New York, it's steady weather, so it should be okay. But then my only tornado in 5 years of living there came through, my film is about a tornado, but it came through my production. And I was like, of course this happened. So we had 5 days to shoot, and it came in the middle, and we lost 2.5 days. So we were just hunkered down with all the, if you hear tornado sirens in the movie, that's not added. So we just, we recorded that while we were inside. And that storm that's raging inside the trailer, that storm was actually raging, but the rest of the time we were just hunkered down and trying to make it through that. So I think the hardest part of that process, when you lose 50% of your shooting time, is actually rewriting the story as we went along. So I rewrote the last half of the film and tried to be pretty fluid about that. But yeah, it was an interesting process.
Thank you.
So for me, several difficulties a little bit. I got Gerardo Taracena. He's pretty big in Latin America and Mexico. I grew up watching his films, and he's very well known for Apocalipto, the Mel Gibson movie. He's the antagonist in that film. And so I was like, oh my God, it will be a dream come true to work with him. But when I wrote the feature, I sent the feature to Monica del Carmen. There's a movie called Leap Year. She was the lead actress in that one. And so when I saw the film, I loved it. I was like, oh my God, I need to work with her. So I sent her the script, and she immediately said yes, I want to be in the feature. And so she invited me to go to Mexico City, and that was my first time going to that city, and amazing. But it was, I was so lucky that that weekend there was a festival. It was a shorts, and she invited me there. And then Gerardo was in one of the shorts, and she worked with them. And I said, oh, did you know him? And he said, yeah, he's my friend, and stuff like that. So a year later, when I wrote La Ramona, after meeting her, I give her a call, and I said, Monica, I have to ask you for something. And she said, what? Whatever you need. And I said, well, I need Gerardo. And he said, you have his phone number? He said, yeah, I can give it to you. So I give him a call, and he answered, and I said, there's no time for me to be shy anymore or anything. And so when I call him, I said, please don't hang up. This is Antonio. And immediately I had to say, I'm Monica del Carmen's friend. Please don't hang up. I'm not a stalker or whatever. And so so I explained it. And I said, I'm writing a short. I have an agenda. This is I'm trying to showcase this so they can show the people that have money or production companies can see that I have potential. Obviously, I told him that I had to be a little bit secure of that. And then he said, send me the script. And I said, okay, sure. At the time, I only had 7 pages, and he responded me right away, and he said he liked it. So once he agreed to do the film, it took us a year because of scheduling conflict. He already was working on a TV show in Houston, Texas. And I said, you're already in the U.S., so just I fly you here. He said, it's not that easy, I'll let you know. I said, look, Gerardo, you tell me what days you're off or when are you free, and we're gonna work around your schedule. So every time I would talk to him, I felt like he was calling me to say, oh, I'm not going to do it, oh, I'm not able. And before he would say something like that, I would say, Gerardo, whenever you're ready, you just let me know, please. Because I knew I wanted to work with him. And so after that year, he finally said yes, and he came to San Diego for 5 days. And so I think that was the most difficult part, because we had to work around his schedule and stuff like that. Gabby, which I was lucky enough to watch a film called La Tiricia. She was one of the lead actors in there. And when I watched the film, I said, she is La Ramona. Let me. So I tried to send an inbox, and she responded right away. And I said, I'm going to send you the script. Gerardo is already on board. And as soon as I mentioned Gerardo, she's like, oh, I'm in it. So I was like, yes, please, thank you. And so, she came from Mexico City. Gerardo was in Houston. She flew there, and we started shooting. There was one particular time that would happen. We were shooting the scene, one of the clips. It was the desert. We drove 2 hours from San Diego. It's in Borrego Springs, and me and Gerardo, my assistant was driving, and Gerardo and I were talking a lot. And I said, please share me everything about Mel Gibson and what happened in that movie in Apocalypto. I want to know everything. So we were talking to it was like 2-hour trip, and we actually missed the exit. It was like probably like 5 miles. And I'm like, oh, are we there yet? And my assistant was like, you're supposed to tell me. And so, but he didn't want to interrupt because I was talking to Gerardo, of course. And so coming back, there was a checkpoint. And I said, oh, Lord. I said, Gerardo, do you have your passport? No. And the girlfriend was there, and she didn't. And all of a sudden, I became the coyote. Oh, yeah, I did, because what am I going to say to the Border Patrol? Sweetie, they don't have a passport. Please let us go. So I immediately start like freaking out. I was like, I finally have you in San Diego. We're going to shoot, and now you're going to get deported? I don't think so, sweetheart. So what happened is that I told, please, Gerardo, don't say anything. Nobody says anything. Let me speak. And I use a little bit of my feminine side. And I said, thank God for that. So the Border Patrol, when we were there, the Border Patrol came and he said, hey, so U.S. citizen? And I said, yes, U.S. citizen. What about in the back? And I said, you know what? We missed our exit. We're shooting a film. And have you guys ever seen Apocalypto? And he said, yes. And I said, Gerardo, take off your glasses, please. And then he's like, oh, that's him. And he said, yep, that's Gerardo. Yes, he worked with Mel Gibson. Yes. And he's like, can I get a picture with him? And I said, oh, Gerardo, please, picture. And so another Border Patrol came in, and he said, what's going on? And he's like, oh, they're actors. They're shooting a film. Oh, so everything was all right. Should we let them go? Yeah, let them go. So they let us go. And I wasn't going to drive 2 hours, because normally what would happen is they would make us go back 2 hours, pick up the passports, come back 2 hours later. So it would be 4 hours of wasting. And I said, I'm not going to let that happen. Sorry, dear. And so, yeah, that's what happened.
While filming, I turn it off. While filming for Akeem, we did spend a lot of time in court, actually, under different circumstances. I did note that one of our co-directors is here in the room, Jeremy Levine. I'd like to ask him if he would briefly answer before he has to catch an airplane, the question about how we found our young subject and what it was like to work in a world of teenagers where we had to build trust in order to tell this story.
Where is your... There you are.
Hi, everybody. I wasn't expecting this, but good to see you all. So Jeff had told us about this school that this judge set up, and it just sounded like an incredible story. And Jeff had done so much work with the judge already, writing the article, that the judge kind of really opened up the school and his courtroom in this incredible way. And so we knew that this was just an amazing opportunity we couldn't pass up. We also knew that we really didn't want to tell a survey film. We didn't want to kind of do the thing you see oftentimes in documentaries where it's like, here's 3 kids going through this period in their life. We wanted to focus in on one student. So it became really important to find the right student to tell this story. We probably interviewed about 30 students really in depth. So many of them had just these incredible stories. And Daje, the girl in the film, was not one of them. We were filming with some of her friends, and she just walked in to a scene and stole the show. And I think it was just kind of an immediate, just this thought that, yes, this is the person that needs to tell this story. She just had this openness, this charisma, this ability to kind of step back and you know, she was 17 years old, so she could be a kid. She could gossip about boys, and then she could talk about, you know, getting shot and the trauma, and not only that, but understanding what impact that had on her psychologically. So there's just so much going on, and on top of that, she was really excited about working with us, which is probably the most important thing, because we were going on a multi-year journey together, and you know, me as a white outsider, and Jeff as somebody from St. Louis, but an outsider to North St. Louis. It was really important that we had a strong partner, and we didn't believe in this idea of a documentary subject. She was a participant. She was involved in the storytelling with us. So that's the short of it.
Thank you so much.
Hello. So yeah, I didn't work with kids, but I mean, I guess I could talk about Tunde. So the lead of my film is Tunde Adebempe, who is the lead singer of TV on the radio, and some people know him from Rachel Getting Married. And he was having a baby, or his wife was about to have a kid, and so we only had him for a limited amount of time. And so I forgot to mention earlier that my fiance, who's also my producing partner, and we had decided we were going to do a short before the summer ended. And so we were under like this crazy time constraint to get this thing done. And also Tunde's baby was coming. So we were forced to do everything like kind of rushed. And so there were a lot of problems when you're rushing a production, as I'm sure you guys know. And so many bad things happened. And one of which was that our AC had erased over some of the footage by mistake. And so a few weeks later, we had to get everybody back and do some reshoots. But Tunde had cut off all his hair for a commercial that he got booked on. And so we were like freaking out, like, how are we gonna do this? We had shot all this footage. So I had to call somebody who happens to be Will Smith's and Jamie Foxx's hair guy, who created the whole beard and everything. A lot of that stuff you would never know that was like put on him and everything like that. So that's just one kind of crazy story, I guess I could say, even though it has nothing to do with your question. But yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Actually, it did. It kind of, you guys said a lot that was leading toward my next question, which is always interesting to hear the backstory of the conditions of production. I think we all like hearing that. We kind of want to know what you go through to bring these stories to life, and we know it's not easy. So because some of you have already done such a good job with that part of the question, I think what I'm going to do is actually expand that out and talk more about the conditions of production, because these are very different kinds of films, and I'm sure that there are different kind of budgetary constraints or no constraints. I'm not sure that's the case in filmmaking. But if you want to talk about those conditions, and those of you that haven't talked about anything particularly memorable that happened trying to bring this story to life, but we like to hear about the budgets. We like to hear about how independent cinema in particular gets made and gets to places like this. So I will open that up. So some of you have already shared a little bit about those wild stories. For those of you that haven't, we want to hear. And also, some of you have alluded to the length of time each of these have taken. You mentioned 8 years. Years out for a couple of you in cultivating the relationships around the scripts that you have. You have a massive production with very big stars. I'd like to hear about those things, and I think everybody else would too. So I'll continue that question, and I'll start here again.
Sure, yeah. So, goodness, I mean, when you have so many years, I mean, actually in production, it's kind of crazy. I had so much time to prep that we actually it was a pretty great shoot. A lot of the horror stories that people hear, there was so much prep that I had the time to really get everything going. So we were ahead day one, and end of the first week, we'd actually gained a day, which was kind of crazy. And, but everything leading up until that was hell. I mean, it was so traumatizing. We actually lost our lead actor 3 days before. I wanted Christopher Denham before. He wasn't available. He was on Broadway with David Mamet's China Doll with Al Pacino, which was crazy. And so he wasn't available, and he had just finished this show on WGN called Manhattan. And so he just had a baby and needed some actual time. So that wasn't going to happen. So we went out to other people that we were kind of being forced to go to. And we picked someone, and then he dropped out, like I said, 72 hours before shooting. So when that happened, it was complete panic. And then that also inferred who our lead actress was going to be. So we basically casted the film with 2 days before shooting, so which was crazy. But thankfully, Chris came back, and through begging and pleading, he came to work with us. So yeah, that, and then I got strep throat on the shoot, and just all kinds of weird little things would pop up. But for the most part, we were really lucky. I have to say we were really lucky. I have been warned not to say anything about budget when I was talking about the film. Our distributor told me, he's like, don't say anything, Aaron. Make sure you don't talk about it. But, there were restraints, and we obviously had to, when you're dealing with all of these makeup effects and things that we had, it's really hard because the timing of that, and you have to make your days, quote unquote, right? So there's pretty elaborate makeup effects that we had. We hired Robert Kurtzman's group, who had worked on like Evil Dead and Predator and stuff, which was crazy that they came down from Ohio to help us out. But we had to, I had this idea for an effect, and it was, okay, what do they already have? How do I repurpose that gag for what I need to make it work? Because we couldn't create all new ones. So you have to, it's just more, as a director, you're always just adapting to the circumstances, and whatever's thrown at you, finding a way to pivot and make it work. So that's most of what was there, but it wasn't, there's not actually that many horror stories. Once it got made, we were super, super lucky. It just took a really long time. But once we got there, we were really lucky. Yeah.
Very effective effects.
Oh, thank you. That's to Robert and their team. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that, because he said 8 years, and I was like, I wrote this thing 6 months before we shot it, and so I feel really lucky in that. But so that was it took very little time in prep, or from writing to prep to, because I kind of wrote it knowing that I had this group of investors that would finance a family film. So while that's not necessarily the direction I would have gone initially with my career, I embraced it and kind of wrote it for that, because I would think we're all in the same position where like you want to make content, and that's, you try to figure out how to best suit the needs of the people that are supporting you as well, and so you kind of navigate that, puzzle that together. As far as like crazy things, I mean, we shot a week in Michigan, and it was under the ice. I'm from Florida originally, and so they took the camera and they put it in underwater housing, and then these crazy men dove down under they do this willingly, actually. We found people that were already doing this recreationally, and very strange. And they took the camera and they said, well, it's actually great because when you get in the water, it's only 30 degrees. So we're actually warmer than you guys standing up there where it's below 0. And that was not a reassuring thought to me either way. But they got great stuff, and that was really interesting to me. Horses never hit their marks, so there's that. There's that daily struggle. And they poop all over your set, and they just have blatant disregard for that sort of thing. And then, I mean, we had so many really amazing actors, but we also had a really limited budget. So it was like, yeah, you can have John Cleese for 2 days, and you have to get him from London to Bulgaria in that time. And he has to have time to adjust because he's 80. And so he is 80. You would never know, though. He's sharp. Man, he's sharp. So there was a lot of that. Also, we had one of the actors, an American actor, who came to set, a very prominent actor, and had the scene was shot underground, like 10 stories or something crazy underground in this massive cave. And there's not like, you can't put like a bathroom down there. So, you know, we were all peeing in cups, and that's the reality of that. And you're like, we're all democratized here. And also, an actor showed up with like, this actor had been going through tons and tons of dialogue coaching, this American actor, and or accent coaching, I guess, to have this accent. But it's not a situation where with indie film where you can be like, yeah, no, I know you've been on 200 episodes of this, but like you still need to audition. You don't have that. You are like, yes, please, thank you. I can't believe you're doing this. So this actor showed up on set with an outrageous accent that they'd been practicing for months and months, and I'm like, what do we do? You know, that was a challenge, and so it was kind of like, could we just dial it down like just a tiny bit? Because you also, actors are very sensitive creatures as well, so you have to like coddle them to some extent too. And but like that accent just, it doesn't exist anywhere on Earth. And then we're like, it's a fantasy. It doesn't have to exist on Earth. And if only the reviewers could find that. So there's constant things, right? Like your filmmaking, it's so much of it is like, this is the plan that we have, and then it's like, but this is the reality that you have, and you might be making a fantasy film, but that is not reality. This is a real thing, and you're just constantly, you're like troubleshooting everything, and you find out what's really fantastic, hopefully, is that like these things that you have to kind of work around, they end up being fine, or even making it better. Like the horse in my film, if you guys go see it, it was supposed to be like very involved, and it's on every single page, and then come to find out when you get in the edit, we're like, this horse is literally tied to a tree in every scene, because that was just the reality of, I mean, it doesn't look like that. We cut around that and tried to figure out how to make this horse like respond and stuff, but it's like that kind of stuff where you just have to get your shots in. You have to make your day. And if that means you rewrite the script on the fly, and that's what you do. And that's kind of a wonderful thing too. There's so many stories though. I don't want to, you go.
So I made Tiny Mammals as my NYU grad thesis film, and I had done it as actually a vignette and a feature of vignettes that were all about children in difficult times, and it keeps going to more and more fantasy. So I did this as kind of a test, and I remember I hadn't really seen a movie like this, but then after making it, I saw a pigeon sits on a branch reflecting on existence, and I went up and hugged the director afterwards. I was like, thank you. Now I can point to this film. But yeah, I did that in August, almost 2 years ago, and then I got a job out here in Los Angeles, so I moved pretty quickly, so I didn't finish post on the film for a very long time, and then I finally edited it And I was like, it's missing something. It's too impressionistic. It needs something to tie it together. And I was like, I need voiceover from, this character way in the future reflecting back. And I was trying to figure out who to do that. And I was watching Flatliners, and I saw this Beth Grant in that, and I was like, oh, Beth Grant would be so perfect. And I mentioned that out loud to my roommate, and she was like, I know Beth Grant. She lives down the street. Let's call her right now. And I was like, what?
That's crazy.
Los Angeles. I don't understand that place. So we called Beth, and she agreed to do it immediately. And she was in Toronto at the time. So a week later, I was working with Beth Grant, which was a dream. And we did that, and then I finished the film pretty quickly after that, just in November. And it felt like it went like very smoothly after we had her to tie everything together. But yeah, it's like on set, it's always, I think, just about rolling with the punches. And, we lost half of our locations. And I found out, I won't speak about budget specifically, but we had a 25-person crew. Mm-hmm. And when we lost our locations, I was just like, when you have to roll with it, take 3 people with you and try to talk really nicely to neighbors and say, can we use your property? It's just the 3 of us. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. So we did that on several locations. But yeah, the most difficult, the one that I had to cultivate the relationship with was I needed an entire trailer park. And because I had that experience of having family in trailer parks, I was just like, you cannot roll up with the crew and be like, yeah, we want to shoot in your trailer park. So I would drive 3 hours every week, and I saw all of these trailer parks, and I found one group that I really liked, and I went there 6 times before filming and just hung out with all the neighbors until they really trusted me. And then I said, okay, but when I come back, there will be 25 people here and like 5 vehicles and like a lot of dollies and stuff, so it's gonna be crazy. And they were like, sure, sure, sure. And so we did that, and they loved it, and they even let us use, several people's trailers for holding and shooting, and they were just completely wonderful. But yeah, I'm all about like going ahead of time and trying to cultivate relationships, and then if you lose your locations, just minimizing. Yeah.
Great strategy.
Mm-hmm. For me, it was a little bit, I knew that the more I prepare, the less obstacles it was going to be for production. So especially, this is my first time working with professional actors or well-known actors in Latin America and Mexico. So I knew that I have to be on my A game, and by that I said I have to build a team that is very strong. So I was lucky enough to I know my cinematographer Jesse Aragon. We went to school together. He's actually here. He's right there, and he yes. And so we went to school together. We met there. We did 3 short films. We learn. We learn. Sometimes with those 3 short films, put them together, and it's kind of like a feature. And yeah, we struggled a lot. But thanks to that, it helped to actually prepare for this short. But that was years after graduation. And I told him, I said, once we have the script locked in the way we wanted it, because we would have meetings. He lives in LA, I live in San Diego, so we would travel. And I said, let's do it. And I told him, we already have Gerardo, we already have this, and so let's bring a producer. I need a good producer for me. I need someone to help me with this. And I think that was another challenging part, to find someone who I can trust, who can help me with this and actually because of the money issue. I knew I wasn't going to be able to pay the producer. It's and you kind of have to ask for favors in this situation. And I did a lot for favors because I was lucky enough, for example, to find Norma. She's one of the producers here. She's and Norma helped me with getting the locations once, and for free, by the way, for free. So I didn't have to do that. Jesse Aragon I admire him. He trusts in my work, and I believe in his work. So so he told me, I said, you don't have to pay me. You pay the crew behind me. And so I said, that's a huge help. He owns his own camera, the Red Epic. So I was like, look, I'm being blessed by all these things. So that actually pushed me to work a little bit harder and prepare a little bit more. And so then I start finding little things, more things that I didn't have to pay. With Gerardo, I knew that, okay, so I probably need to spend a little bit more money on him because, he's a known actor and stuff like that. And I still, as a business person, we went back and forth. This is a short film, this is meant to be this, blah, blah, blah. And I sure did convince him. I said, sweetie, it's my first time here, so please, I'm no Monica del Carmen, that's your friend, and he's my friend too, so, as friends in common. And so I did convince him, so he didn't charge me that much. Gabby, same thing. And so it was all about that. It was all about negotiating a lot of things because I knew that I have a budget. When my producer came along, he said, why don't we do an Indigo? And I said, no, nobody's going to put money for that. I never done it before, so how are we gonna do it? And we did it. We didn't got what we asked, but we knew we were gonna get something. So that whatever it was, I mean, it helped, even $100 or whatever. But we ended up getting about $2,000 with that, so that was a big help. I paid for a lot of the food. Also, thanks to my mom, she cooks amazing. She's, oh God, Lord, she's from Sinaloa, and Lord, chilaquiles, enchiladas, whatever you want. And she would cook for us, and she's used to cooking for a lot of people. So and Gerardo was very happy about that. So I knew I need to make everybody happy within that. And also you have to be multitasking. If I had to do a little bit of makeup, I would do that. Not because I wanted to. It's kind of like it's not an ego thing. It's more like, well, the makeup artist didn't show up, so what am I gonna do? Wait for what? No, sweetie, then you get on YouTube and you learn how to do makeup and then you do it.
Tutorials.
Okay. Oh yeah. That's the best thing you can do is that. So a lot of things in control like that. Same thing. I mean, impose graphic designers for the posters. I would say how much, and they would charge me thousands, and I said, sweetie, that's more than what the film costs. No, I don't think so. Go to YouTube. I learned how to do it, and I did it. So. And again, it's not about the ego, it's about you getting your things done. It's all about that. And then you have to put the hat of the business person, which I think that's the hardest thing as well, because my mentality was as an artist, a filmmaker, and now you're a business person. So you have to think about every little thing in there. But you also wanted to make it fun, you wanted to make it have a good energy and strong team together so that it's actually fun too. I mean, at the end of the day, for me, energy was a number one in there because once you see the film, people who have seen it and they usually come to me and they usually tell me, Antonio, very emotional, right, and everything. And my goal was to write something that was more on the emotional right. It was a journey of a 16-year-old Mexican girl being transported for sex trafficking purposes. So yes, it is the theme about human trafficking, but I didn't want to let that guide me. It was more about her being a 16-year-old girl and what she's going through, and I wanted people to identify that. And I wanted to show a little glimpse of what she was going through. And for me, that was the goal. And when people came to me, people who have seen it and told me that, it's like, oh, we did it. It's a team collaboration, and I think my theme for that, and we built something, and I think that was for me the biggest one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Marshall, you go. I'm not going to make you beat the caboose again.
No, I already feel like I already said my part of my. I mean, I could just list a bunch of problems that we had, but that wouldn't be.
But I did find out that, tell them a little bit about the location, because that's interesting.
Well, the location, we shot at the Ace Theater in downtown LA. And one of the interesting things about that theater, that it was originally United Artists Theater, that Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford, and they built this theater. And it was kind of interesting. People have always asked if the bathroom that we shot in was a set, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, I was obsessed in looking for the right bathroom. And so I know like every bathroom in Los Angeles. And I went to a festival, a Sundance Fest, Next Fest at the Ace Theater. And I went downstairs and I went to this bathroom, and as soon as I saw that bathroom, I fell in love. And I couldn't think of anything past this bathroom. Like nothing else mattered anymore. And I was obsessed, and I was like, I really have to have this particular bathroom. Because the bathroom had so much character and charm, and it had that old world feel. And but shooting in it was a nightmare because the building was built in 1923, I think, or 25, something like that. So it has all those years of the smell of piss inside of there, and we had to turn the air conditioning off, so it just magnified the stench, and it was just so hot and humid in there, and you're locked in this box, and it just like there were times I thought I was gonna faint, like it was just so hot, and but it was worth it in terms of production value. So it was pretty cool. But
I agree. It's a good bathroom. Thank you.
I will talk a little bit about budget, not because I'm an executive producer on this film, but because I just happen to know the numbers. Our film had a $600,000 budget. We were incredibly lucky early on to get some very impressive grants that lent credibility to the project, playing upon the success and the record of our directors. Sundance jumped on early with some money. ITVS came on early with a lot of money. Smaller grants, New York State Council of the Arts, Ford Foundation, a variety of others. We have had incredible success with this film. It premiered at Berlin in February. We were at Tribeca last weekend. We're going to Hot Docs next weekend. You can Google for Akeem and the reviews, and the amount of media attention is envy-worthy. We are still raising the money. We've paid some really accomplished people to be part of our team. The directors, the cinematographer, the executive producer have made nothing on this project. And that's beside the point, because we are overjoyed to be able to share this story and bring it to audiences. The film was made by 4 people. When I watch the credits, there are 2,000 people, and they're all deserving of thanks and earned what their credit is. But this film was made by 4 people. It's an incredibly intimate verite portrait, and as you watch the film, there are pretty much 2, max 3 people off camera. A director, a sound guy, a producer. The access that we had was just unbelievable, but in filming a documentary, you go in with the story idea and you don't know where the story is going to lead. I mentioned that I came at this as a reporter, and I viewed this experience as a reporter. Because this is my first time filmmaking experience, I constantly said to my team, what does an executive producer do? Am I doing it right? Am I doing the right things? And I think my naivete just drove this forward, because for me, really for all of us, it was a constantly reported and re-reported experience. As with the best of any reporting experiences, you just go in with an idea, but you have to keep your eyes and your ears and your heart open. And the story will find you.
Yeah.
And that's what
Very
happened
well
in this
said.
case. The story found us.
Very well said. And Jeff, is this on? Yeah. You prefigured my next question, because I do want to open it up to the audience soon, but I did want to ask what's next for this particular film, and then are you working on a future project already? What's your next project? So I'll start down there, Marshall, and come down. Yeah.
Well, this film is, I guess, next is going to be at, I don't know if we're supposed to say this. Some of these festivals you're not
Oh, no,
supposed to
it's okay.
announce.
You can answer that question with what's most comfortable. I wasn't putting you on the spot.
Well, one thing I can say is that it was selected to be part of Sundance theatrical tour. So it's going to go around
Terrific.
the world and around the country, 70 cities in
Wow.
the United States and around the world. Other announcements are coming. And the next part of
Are you
it-
working on another project?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'm working on another project that is, it's a feature. It's an amateur kidnapping that goes horribly wrong, based on a true story. And but it's only in script form right now, so we're still working on that right now.
Come back to us.
Yeah.
Our film, For Akeem, has a strong mission component. Although it is very much a individual slice of life story, it is set against a backdrop of juvenile justice issues, the school-to-prison pipeline issues, issues that are currently being debated, such as what's the appropriateness of adjudicating 17-year-olds in adult court? What's the appropriateness of kicking kids out of school? We are having a great many outreach conversations with juvenile justice workers, social justice workers. Several law and groups of attorneys have reached out to be part of the conversations and to see this film. Just as important for us is to take this film to the people that it portrays, not just in the community of St. Louis where it was filmed, but across the country. It's been a real joy for us to have large audiences of school children see this film and see a depiction of themselves that they do not normally see. When Dajae spoke after showing of the film before 300 students in New York last week and came out on stage afterwards, she was treated as a rock star. And she's so remarkable. Just to give you a quick update on her, she is now enrolled in St. Louis Community College and hoping to start classes this fall as an ultrasound technician, which is a remarkable leap when you see this film. As for my own next step, I have aligned myself with another pair of documentary filmmakers because I just view this as school. I'm just learning about how it's done, and I want to see how others do it.
Well, you're a terrific spokesperson.
Yes, you
did.
I have the feature already written. It's called My Virgin Guadalupe. And I grew up in a town very, very small in Sinaloa, about 500 people. I grew up there until I was 13. So the feature takes place in that town. And so when I wrote La Ramona, it was also an inspiration of the main character of that feature. So I have that feature that I'm trying to get it produced. That's one. And now with the Ramona, a lot of the reactions that I'm getting is like, oh, what's going to happen to Ramona? So they kind of hinting like, oh, yeah, I want a feature. So I started writing the feature for this one as well. So I'm working on that and other small projects too. But yeah, pretty much.
Thank you.
I'm writing a feature for my lead with my husband right now, who's in the audience.
Yeah,
and it's called 14. And I wanted to show Sophia with a very young bipolar mother taking this road trip from New Orleans to Colorado and kind of like discovering her own, going through puberty, discovering her own sexuality along the way and becoming her own person. And I thought, who better than someone who has such a deep soul when you see her on screen. So we're writing that right now, and I hope to shoot that in a few months.
Terrific.
My film Albion was bought by Netflix, and so it'll be coming out there. And my second film, which if you guys are here on Sunday, you'll get to meet the little pony, was bought by Sony. And then next up, I have 2 scripts. I'm kind of like pivoting a little bit out of the family genre, but with stuff that's very mainstream. And I'm really passionate about mental illness. So they're both female-based films about that deal with that. One of them is the one that will be next. Fingers crossed, I guess you never know. But is a story about it's like The Sixth Sense, but with a teenage girl who has schizophrenia and can't tell if her boyfriend's real.
That sounds awesome. So Camera Obscura, we were very fortunate to get financed by NBC Universal and Schiller Films. So that will be coming out June 9th. Date, kind of like a day and date, means just theatrically be a few theaters across the U.S. We're trying to figure out how many theaters right now. That'll be June 9th, and then on the 13th will be the release on VOD pretty much everywhere. And then Chiller, Sci-Fi Network and all that, they'll do like a TV premiere sometime later this year. So that's super cool. And then, to me. And
it is cool.
Yeah, we're really lucky. And then, so we're also, one of the, it's weird, so this is my directorial feature. I worked as a producer on another horror film called Starry Eyes that I'm super proud of. And thank you, the one person that saw that. But it's out there, it's good, I promise. And but I found a love for producing as well. So my production company and some of my producing partners that are here, we're gonna be producing 2 features one of which we're hoping to go into production just here the next couple months. It's called Bar Fight. It's a survival horror, John Wick meets Goodfellas kind of thing.
Wow.
And yeah, like it's pretty crazy. We're producing that, and then another that's kind of a Southern Gothic noir called Where the Red Fox Lies, that we're gonna do. Has to do with a woman with a strong female protagonist that has spontaneous combustion issues. So those are both
I like that
super,
pause, issues.
yeah, super cool. And then the what I'll be directing next is a film called Dream Machine. And I don't mind that we're announcing all these, whatever. I guess these are official announcements. But Dream Machine, and it's a science fiction thriller about a man who creates a mechanism to control his dreams. And we're hoping to go into production with that like later on this year. We're talking to some financiers right now and getting some things going. So also as an aside, I understand bathroom obsessions. I just wanted to say that because I know probably every bathroom in Baton Rouge. We almost built our bathroom because I was so particular about it. So I just want to tell you, you're not alone. It's okay.
Don't feel
we had to
weird,
find
man.
my shining bathroom. It was like really important to me. And then we finally found it in the film. So I get that. I relate.
awesome.
But anyway, yeah.
Excellent. We have such a talented group of people here because we have, Castile is also an actress, but has found a passion in directing. You're finding passion in producing, as well as Jeff, kind of changing careers. Jeff, and that investigative journalist in you, I think, is finding that side of filmmaking that is really incredible. And then for everyone else sitting here, the writing that you're doing is just amazing. And I know for some people in the audience, they are aspiring to do these things, maybe even one of them, not all of them that you're doing. So let's give them a round of applause. This is an amazing, talented group of people. We admire you. We come to watch what you do because we wish we could do some of it, I
That's
think.
the important thing, though.
Yes.
Like, everybody here in Florida, we have to get our film incentive back. I've shot 2 films here, and my next 2 films are going to be shot here unless the investors say you have to go elsewhere. And that's so important. I mean, you guys are all here, so you support film, but like we have to do it at the levels up at the government too. Yeah, right?
Thank you. Thank you for that. I do want to open it up to your questions. So there is the microphone over here, and you can queue up. And yeah, sir, say who you are and.
Hi, I'm Peter Gordon. I actually teach the business of film at Full Sail's Film MFA program. And I would really like to know, because especially for my students, they find the whole idea of getting money for their movies to be very mysterious. And you've addressed it a little bit, as Jeff especially talking about grants, but can you talk a little bit more about the fundraising process? And also, as filmmakers, how involved were you? Did you have to meet with the potential funders? How much information did they need? I know some of you don't want to talk specific numbers, but if you could talk the process, I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Does one or two of you want to take that on? I don't know if all of us can take it on, but yeah.
Yeah, quickly is that I have another project that my executive producer, who's here with me, and some of you met him, he's kind of crazy. When I told him the concept that it's going to be basically a day in the life of a bathroom attendant in LA nightclub, he loved it and instantly said he'd back. And also, he and I have a project together that Viola Davis was attached to for a while. And I ran into Viola and her husband at a party. That's how LA is. And they invited me to the office, and I told them the concept, and they backed me as well. So my financing process was a little easier on this one because I had existing relationships that I could turn to, and they knew me already. So that's why I said I'd make it quick, because it was just,
Yeah, but I think all of you have talked about relationships. So for your
Relationships
students,
are crucial.
building and cultivating relationships with people, I think, is one of the ingredients here, right?
Because I was at film school, like we worked on each other's films. So I probably worked on like 40 people's films. So when it was time to make mine, I called in all the favors. And then in terms of raising money, it was mostly Indiegogo, which is great, but also like the most exhausting way to raise money ever. So I was, in retrospect, I was like, I should have just gotten like a full-time job and done that. But it was like, I worked with a team of 4 women who are amazing, and we literally posted up like 10 times a day on Twitter and Facebook and emails, and had like a 30-day fundraising process. And that got most of the money for the film. And then in post, I always find it easier to raise money in post when you can show, kind of the product. And so we got grants to finish up the post-production on that.
Thank you. Go ahead, Aaron.
I was going to say, just as a former Full Sail student myself, it's you just have to get used to hearing no and not being afraid to walk up to anyone and ask them for money. It's a hard thing, and you have to get used to it. And we talk about 8 years. The amount of times we had the money and it fell through, I can't count. So it's interesting. There's 2 films here at the festival, and I see and I won't say what they are. They're great films, but I see the production company. I'm like, oh, they turned me down. I remember that day, And it's, but again, it worked out great. We actually ended up getting a bigger budget and more opportunities in the end, by being diligent. But we just have to get used to saying no, and get used to going up to people and talking about your movie. And even, as a director, you have to be a producer too, I think. You just have to kind of be used to selling yourself and getting out there. I was put on phone call after phone call with people high up at NBC Universal that they didn't care about the script, honestly. I think a few people there didn't. They just wanted to know, was I competent enough to do this, especially as a first-time director. They had seen my short films. They knew I could do something. But I had to sell myself, and you have to be selling yourself every day, and you have to be not afraid to hear no, and then shrug it off and go on and just take those bumps as they go.
That's good.
You just got to push.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mickey from Orlando.
Hi, Mickey.
And I have a question. Well, I have 2 comments first about the bathroom. I'm so glad they're not knocking everything down and rebuilding, and that tile went with that wood, and the story you told was just wonderful.
Thank
And
you.
Ramona, a comment about the girl doing that from a man said he couldn't understand why she wouldn't use him to save her. And I was kind of like, well, at that age, I think you just handled that situation. They don't know, especially someone who doesn't know what they can get from anyone, anywhere, would just let go and move on. And I thought it was just a wonderful choice. But this incentive in Atlanta, I was thinking, if you get your incentive in Atlanta, do you have to stay across that line, or can you cross down here, or do some of your work in Florida, even though it's an Atlanta incentive? And number 2, if our governor does the final say, someone told me, I was always blaming Rick Scott, but is it the people under? I thought the governor had the final say, and that the legislation was the people in between that. Does anyone know the answer to that?
I think that just because he did it, I'm going to do this too. Can you come here for a second? Because this person is like advocating for you guys.
Right.
She's the one that stands up in front of these senators.
Right.
Come here. And she can explain things.
Dory again.
This is Dory. She produced my movie. And
Hi,
she
Dory.
literally last week, I'm so in awe of this human. She stood up in front of everybody, all of these senators. She's not experienced that, but she went and told them. So she can help you.
Well, there's actually, and we've been keeping it somewhat on the down low, but now that we've passed the first Senate committee, we can let you know. There is a bill right now in both the Senate and the House. And I should know the number right off the top of my head, but it is the Florida Film Finance Bill. And it's not a perfect solution. I can tell you, Florida film incentives are not coming back anytime soon. Literally, when you walk the halls of the Capitol, if you mention the word incentive, people just immediately shut you down. It's not going to happen right now. As you know, of course, we have a Republican-controlled House and Senate, and I'm bipartisan, so I'm not poo-pooing that. But because we recognize that we had that, we have introduced a bill, Compass actually introduced it, called the Florida Film Investment Bill. It is a nonprofit organization that would be seeded by the state of Florida. Do you have even time for this right now? I feel like I'm hijacking this thing.
It's also a question that you can talk after the session, sure, but I don't know how long you're going to go.
Oh, no, like 60. I'll make it 60 seconds. Long story short, there is a bill pending. It would help bring business to Florida. It acts as the state, instead of being an ongoing incentive, the state would seed this organization. That organization would make extremely low interest rate, like I'm talking even 3%, first money in loans to films. Which, for those of you who produce films, it's a big deal to have your first money in. And it literally last week just passed the Senate, and it probably won't be heard again in this. We still have to go to the House. That'll probably happen in the fall. But if you want information, we'll provide it to somebody around here so that you'll know what you might want to reach out and ask your senators and your representatives to support, because it does actually now have a shot at getting passed.
I'm from Texas, and I live in Austin. We're going through the exact same thing that's happening here in Florida. We actually just lost all our incentives. Everything's being cut. I had a beautiful, wonderful crew of people that I loved, and I wanted to shoot in Austin, and we couldn't do it. I was basically forced to shoot because of financing reasons in Louisiana, which was great, and we had a great time there and great people. But, I would love to come back and shoot in Florida. It would be amazing to come back here and shoot. I used to edit at Century 3 years ago. This would be awesome for people to even remember that place. But so, I have history here, but the incentive debate is huge, and it's going through a number of states here. You just have to foster the crew that you do have and get that going. Otherwise, people are moving, and unfortunately, that is happening.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Dory. Anyone that wants to talk about that after the session, certainly it could be a conversation outside, but I appreciate it, and I think there are people in here that don't know what's going on with Florida, and you just gave us some insight, so thank you, both of you. Another question.
I'm Michael.
Hi, Michael.
I have a couple of questions just for Marshall. I want to know, has your bathroom obsession continued? And I know you've made documentaries in the past, and I just wanted to know how being a documentarian sort of informed and prepared you for narrative filmmaking.
Well, my obsession with bathrooms, no, I don't have it anymore, I don't think.
He found the one.
Yeah, I found the bathroom of my dreams. And in terms of documentaries, I think it prepared me for narratives in the sense that, you're always just looking for the truth, and whether it's a documentary, whether it's narrative, you're always just trying to find the truth of the story and the heart of the story, and I think having that background really prepared me to do this film in that sense, and just making sure that it's honest, and that it tells a human story. So.
Terrific. Thank you.
Jump in real fast with one observation and an answer to the professor who was asking about fundraising. And with your experience in documentaries and my worlds of experience in documentary filmmaking, I have learned that there are enormous amounts of money available for documentary filmmakers if you find the right subject and the right fund and the right funder. I mean, I will fund your documentary if it's about 12-year-old girls living north of the border after 1975 who graduated college with a degree in psychology. That's the movie I want to make. And they will give you that money if you find that right person. So I'm going to guess, and again, you all are much more learned at this than I, that documentary making shorts or features is a great way to get your foot in and establish some credibility and then take it from there.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. I'm Patrick.
Hi, Patrick.
My question is specifically for Antonio. I just was interested in how your experiences and I guess the experiences that informed your work, how do you think those compare to sort of the way that stuff is represented in like mainstream cinema about Mexicans and immigration and things like that?
That's a great question.
I don't think, I didn't want the theme to lead the story. I was focusing on the character, which was the 16-year-old girl in being transported for sex trafficking purposes. So I did some research, a lot of research, but I never wanted that to be what motivates me to write the next scene and over. It was more about me putting myself or if I heard a story into Ramona's shoes, and you know, she was brought not by her own fate to the United States. She's been sold and for sex trafficking purposes. But what does she feel? You know, what does she feel? And then I put myself into that, and again, I wanted the audience to feel a glimpse of what those girls will go through, and just to try, because I never went through that, but just a little glimpse. I did research that it was about 18,000 girls would get transported every year from Mexico to the United States. And so that's something that I didn't know until I started watching a lot of documentaries about that. So in immigration, a lot of the films that I watched in the past about immigrants, it was always that journey, the journey of crossing the border undocumented to this country, always by the desert and what they go through. So I knew about that, and I didn't want to show that. I wanted to show once Ramona was in the U.S. So the show starts once you are in the U.S. soil, when the first coyote crossed her from San Diego to Tijuana, from Tijuana to San Diego, and once the second one, which Gerardo played that coyote, picked her up and takes her to a drop house, and from a drop house, he's going to take her to Los Angeles. So so I was more interested in what happens once you are in the U.S. And yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, and I'm certain, since these filmmakers have told you that they're willing to ask questions of other people, like, will you give me money, that they'll take your questions outside after this. So, sir, one more question?
My name's Steven. I'll try to make this fast.
Thank you, Steven.
I really love beautiful movies that make me feel terrible. And Antonio, your movie was absolutely gorgeous and made me feel absolutely horrible. So thank you. That was fantastic.
Made me feel terrible.
But I actually, I have a question for Dagny. The character of Jacob takes some like social abuse down in the pond scene, and I was wondering, how do you prepare such a young actor, or who's not an actor like you said, how do you prepare somebody who might be sort of young and fragile and still going through formative periods to suffer some kind of abuse on screen and still kind of protect himself as a person? I was wondering if you had anything on that.
Yeah. Well, Jake is not at all fragile. He's actually a very tough kid. And I know because we had some water work to do with him, and we had to clear it with stunts and all of that, and it turns out he's like an amazing swimmer. And he always insisted on doing everything. Like, we had to crawl down, like all of us were holding onto those rocks and shimmying down. And he was like, I'm climbing down on this on my own. And so he like can rock climb. So he rock climbed the whole way down. But yeah, going in, because he hadn't acted before, and that was not his thing, he's actually like a math and science genius. We did a lot of rehearsals, and I think what really saved us with that was his twin sister really talked him through the whole process and why I was asking him to do weird exercises, like concentrate on my hand, because he liked to laugh a lot when we were doing serious things. So she would be like, yeah, she's doing this to get you ready for this like emotional scene. And so that between the two of us, we actually got him ready for all of those emotionally hard scenes. And then I normally don't like the kids to read the script beforehand, but because a lot of it was going to be a tough subject, I did want him and his family to read it and really understand what everything was going to be in setting that up, and how the other kids were viewing him. And he was just terrific. So I was so thankful to work with those twins on that, and they're both rock stars.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Our time has come to an end, so I want to thank you guys. Those are great questions, and I certainly want to thank this group of amazing people. So let's give them another round of applause.